Well, hello, welcome back for another episode of our Friday Love, Learn, and Leadership live show. After being out a couple weeks, we had fall break, and then we kind of scheduling conflict last week, but really excited to dive back into these conversations with our building level leaders and ESU network folks from across the state, just talking about some positive things in education. And so grateful to Heather Thompson of Shelby-Rising City Public Schools and Mark Brady of ESU 7 for joining us to share today. And so really, just amped and looking forward to diving right in and getting things started. And this was something we had on our calendar here for a little while and just really been, just ready to have like a great chat. So I already see from the start that we have folks commenting, hey, Jen McNally in the comments. And I want to encourage folks right from the start to feel free to engage in our conversation live. As you can see there, we can bring in your comments and have you join us for this dialogue as we go about our show today. So we're going to dive right into it here and just we'll take turns talking about our love from this past week. And so that's the disclaimer. This has to be something in the last week that you've experienced in education or personally or professionally, truthfully, that you just absolutely loved. So we'll start with Heather.
All right. So this week I have been able to spend some time. I'm in a book study with a bunch of female leaders from across the state, and we are actually reading the Confidence Code. And so we had our book study this week. And so being able to just form those relationships, and the Confidence Code is all about females in leadership and the differences between confidence in females and in males. And so being able to build those relationships and have that communication with females from across the state and to figure out, gosh, why do we lack confidence in some areas when we're totally capable and able to do those things. So that was definitely one of my loves from this week, one of my many, but that's the one I decided to go with. And so I just wanted to share a quote too from this book study that we did.
Yeah.
And it's, the natural result of underconfidence is inaction. So when we hesitate because we aren't sure, we hold ourselves back, and it matters. Fear of failure leads to inaction, which leads to failure. So that really hit home, because how many times do you just, kind of pause or hesitate before you take action? And those pauses and hesitations, they, cause you to be less confident and less willing to maybe try something new. So that stuck with me. And so I'm going to work on trying new things.
Wow. What you just did there was weave like double Dutch style, like the love, the learn, and the leadership all into one comment, right?
And
like your collaboration where you learn this cool quote that I think definitely speaks to the heart of being a leader.
Yes.
Wow, way to set the bar here, Heather.
Yeah.
And that's terrific. Do you have another little nugget from that book, by the way? I'd be curious to learn a little bit more. And I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit as well, so I'll bring Otis's comment up to give you a chance to think about it. Otis, hey, glad you're on here as well. You're a rock star yourself, good sir. Actually, I'm going to talk to Otis later today about some collaboration and some good things that are going on. So thanks for joining us, Otis. And so, Heather, is there something else that you would kind of impart from that? That's great.
So the book talks a lot about self-compassion and making sure that we are treating ourselves well. And so one of the things, I've got my phone up with my notes. So one of the things that I got from it was treat yourself as you do your friends. Those that are most compassionate to others tend to be least compassionate to themselves. And so in the group, we have amazing people like Josie Floyd from Sutherland. She's part of that group. And then Erin Gonzalez. And so we've got some great people in the group. But we talked about in education, we tend to be very compassionate people. And so if that is true, that those are the most compassionate to others, are least compassionate to themselves, then what do I need to make sure as a leader I'm doing for teachers who might be less compassionate to themselves? What do I need to make sure I'm doing for myself? Because I know I can be very hard on myself. So that was another, I mean, there have been tons of nuggets from this book. And I'm really excited because there's actually a confidence code for girls. And so I have a daughter who's in 7th grade. And I think, the nuggets that I'm getting from it, she could also get at her level. So, yeah.
Good opportunity for a conversation between mother and daughter too. Sounds like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm putting that down right now for girls because I have a daughter, and so I'm going to make sure
Yes.
that I look into that to share with
Yes.
her. And Jen McNally responding
Is in
here.
the group.
Yep. And thanks to Josie at Sutherland for getting that group together on that important topic. Just absolutely love that. And I actually listen to so many different podcasts and different, just voices around things. I like psychology and thinking through pieces like what you're talking about. And I heard once that people are actually more apt, if they have a prescription medicine, to give their pet that prescription medicine regularly than for them to regularly take it themselves. Which would speak to, I thought that was fascinating at the moment, right? Like our willingness to care for other people ahead of our own best interest. And what an interesting dynamic you pose there too, right? You're like, okay, so this really makes me want to take care of my teachers who are out there taking care of other people. And then time out, whoa, I better take care of myself.
Yes.
Because my first inclination was to take care of my teachers. And I had nice perspective on that, and probably a good thing you're in a book club about, right?
Yes.
Timely topic too. I feel like, timely topic too, just with the nature of the school years that we've had the last couple of years for sure.
Yes. And where just our mental health and everything kind of rests right now, not only for our students or our teachers, but for ourselves as well. Yeah.
And Brooke, welcome and thanks for posting on there too. Great thoughts and a quote there, Heather, as confidence matters so much. And
hey,
Brooke.
Mark, you kind of alluded to it there too. Then, do you think that maybe this has a big factor in how I want to say this? The last 18 months has been really hard, regardless of your disposition. But do you think that? Because I would tend to agree with Heather. I feel like in education we tend to be really compassionate people, and we're also hyper reflective, most of us at least. I mean, it's just part of the job. Maybe that means we have carried this even heavier than most people might.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting going into this school year and just different conversations that I've had with people. It's like, in some regard, I don't know that we expected to be for this school year to be as challenging as it is in some ways. I think we anticipated that much more last year, but going into this year, this year has kind of its own unique challenges, and so I think it's still definitely a good, a good reminder of some of the things that Heather's sharing.
Yeah. So, Mark, thinking of that, we've been trying to figure out why has this year been, as an administrative team here at Shelby, we've been trying to figure out why has the start to this school year almost seemed harder than last year. And we've talked a lot about, maybe we came into this year with the expectation of normalcy. And since we don't necessarily have it, it seems like it's even harder because that normalcy is just not there and almost being taken from us when we expected to see it. So, yeah.
That's something I have thoughts about too. And this sub shortages, I think, has been a major factor that I'm hearing, just kind of widespread.
Yes.
And that's really kind of put a strain on systems and on administrators and those kind of things. And
sure.
Even like the people that are in support roles, I think it's been really tough to kind of have consistency across those. And but I love, maybe to bring it back around, that despite all that, we're hanging in there and considering what it is to support one another, and really just focusing in on things that are going to help us navigate this season.
You bet.
Sure. So we got some more comments here. Such a fan of this thinking. So are we. Absolutely. And that's the heart behind this, right? I just love that there's so many people doing great work, and you don't even always know. And you just talk to folks, and you're like, we are part of a bigger team that is all working together for kids, and it just is inspiring, and I'm really excited about that. More comments coming in, and then we're going to get to Mark here in a second. About us staying open, and it poses different challenges, but it also has come with some a lot of positives as well. And I know Jen and I have talked about that kind of informally. And right, we don't like turn off or take days off. And
Ever.
right, Brooke is with you as well. And so, yes, very appreciative of everybody's hard work and what
Yes.
they're doing. So thanks for posting, everyone. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
Mark, I'll pivot to you then now and see, what was your love from this past week?
Sounds good. Well, my love and my learn are also connected, but I'm going to separate them here. So earlier this week, I was in a district meeting with some teachers, and we were talking about supports for English learners. And we started off the conversation just by talking about the many ways that this particular district benefits from having English learners enrolled and in their classes and in their student activities. And that conversation was just really encouraging to me, because it started out by talking about how teachers see their students benefiting by having English learners as classmates, just from different traditions to different life experiences. Like, they can gain so much from interactions, conversations, learning from them. But then the conversation shifted to how the teachers themselves benefited from having English learners in their classroom. And one teacher in particular just mentioned, my English learners pushed me to be a better teacher, because I've realized that I'm constantly thinking through different approaches, different strategies, different ways of teaching skills. And it's just like constantly causing me to reflect. You mentioned that, Andrew, and make changes and just work to improve making my content more and more comprehensible to all of my students, thinking about how students can demonstrate their understanding in different ways. And I love that comment. I was just so encouraged by that. And it was a great conversation. So that was definitely a highlight of my week for sure.
I love that. I know Brooke's listening in. Brooke, this reminds me of the conversation we had on the podcast with Mr. Berzina at Millard West, where he was in support of Brooke's cousin, who has some visual impairments. And he commented on that very thing, just in a different avenue, right? It made him have to literally see and think about the work that he's doing differently because of the challenges that Camille had, and how it made him a better educator. And wow, does that speak to just the heart that our teachers everywhere bring to this profession. It's something really just powerful about that. I love that too. I love that a lot.
Yeah, I love that you took the time at the beginning of the meeting to make sure that you're recognizing how much those students bring, not only to the lives of the students that they're in class with, but to the teachers. I mean, what a way to start a meeting. That's awesome.
Oh, right. That's sort of that. I'm not saying this, but I could see someone having the disposition of, is this a have to or a get to, like, yes, opportunity? And when you frame it that way, then everybody gets in that mindset of like, oh, this is a chance for me to grow, for students to grow, for the culture to be like moved forward. I just absolutely love that. As does Brooke, right? Not
yes,
just, but for teachers. So yeah. This is great. Grateful for everybody's leadership for sure. And I guess in the interest of time, I'll pivot because I'm just so excited about y'all's conversation. Like, I'll be brief with mine, and we'll get back to the learns here in a second. But I kind of have two. One of them is going to be later today. I'm actually going to go. I'm a room parent in my son's classroom, and so I'm going to be there for the Halloween party today. And I'm so excited. I know we'll have masks on, but just the energy of the room and crafts. And there's only 2 adults to get to go in, and I was grateful to be one of them to be in his classroom today. And so that's it will be a love of this week, I have no doubt.
Oh, for sure.
And number 2, I actually thought of right before we jumped on here. I'm really nerdy with this education stuff. And I have some friends that are outside Nebraska who asked me to be on their similar thing like this earlier in the week. And I was like, yeah, this is great, but I'm busy and I'll be with my daughter. So it's okay if she joins, and she did. And it was hilarious to have her kind of on there and just kind of being too cool for school, but still playing into it. She's in 5th grade. And so she's just right on that, like, I think cusp of getting to where everything I do will be completely lame. It just is only partially lame right now. But they asked her on the live show about her teacher and what she liked most about her teacher. She shared the sentiment that what she loves most about her teacher is that her teacher gets her. Just like choked me up, and I just loved that. And it just really speaks to just how critical that relationship piece is, because my daughter's having the best school year she's had to date. And that's not to say anything about the previous teachers, but it just has resonated. Right time, right place, right person. And so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
That's so awesome, because we talk about all the time, it's about those relationships. It's about those relationships. And that's just proof right there that Oh, good for her that she has such a great relationship.
Yeah, it speaks to the impact too. I think, teachers do, so many teachers do a great job of building relationships, and we know it's important, but I don't know that we always realize the depth of the impact until we have conversations like that. And yeah, that's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
And I think the weird thing about the learning scenarios that took place over the last 18 months is that there was, particularly when it was all remote, things were a little chaotic. It's like, okay, we got to do some things to kind of continue to have rapport and to understand one another. And I've talked to so many teachers who built in strategies at that time to foster those things in a new way that have been translated over into the classroom. So in person, right? And Heather, have you seen any of that too? I know you're kind of nodding there, I guess. Or
Yeah.
there,
So, all of those things that we did during COVID, when we were not in the buildings, were totally uncomfortable at the time. But so at that time, I was in Plainview as the elementary principal there, and I encourage teachers nonstop, don't let these amazing things that you're doing now stop once we're back in the classroom. So, if you're doing those silly songs, or you have we had one teacher who would do like fitness days. And so she would get on there and do an exercise routine, and the kids would then get on and do it. I'm like, don't let those stop once we're back in the classroom, because these are things that our kids are grasping to right now to get them through, and they'll continue to get them through those hard days. So just never step back into the box, I guess, that we were in.
Oh, yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah, that's good. I just think through, a question to think through for all of us is like, what did we learn during that time we want to be intentional about continuing now that we're back face to face with students? And I think that's a great thought.
Yeah, for sure.
Could not agree more. And Otis, with the emphasis there on the George Couros quote about relationships, and does anything else truly matter as much as that? It doesn't. And Brooke saying, that you compliment to you, Heather, for building relationships.
Thanks, Brooke.
Right. Yeah. And I did, as a result of having you on the show, get a chance to go and check out your Twitter feed. And it is, Brooke, I'm going to agree. What a celebration of the relationships that you have and the students that you serve. You can see that in such a public way, and that's really powerful.
I got to give 2 away today, so yay.
Yeah, I saw that too. You have a couple Halloween birthdays.
Yes.
That's terrific. Well, such a fun chat here. We talked love, learn, and leadership already, and that's just round one.
Yes.
So we'll extend this through some learns from this week. Heather, what's something that you that stood out to you?
Yeah. So before we went live here, Andrew, Mark and I told you that we got to spend the day together yesterday. And so my learn comes from the principal cluster that we had at ESU 7. I love going to any event they have at ESU 7. It's so hard to be away from the building. But I know that I have people here that can man the ship while I'm gone. And I know that my time there will be amazing, and I'll get so many great nuggets. And so yesterday we talked a lot about helping to grow our teachers, because we want to make sure that, especially evaluations and things of that nature, teachers don't necessarily feel that as us growing them. They feel that as, us evaluating them. And so we talked about intentional reflection practices that we have right now in our district. And we talked about that being teacher to principal, teacher to teacher, and teacher self-reflection. And so I came away with, oh my gracious, I'm doing some great things, and we're doing some great things here at Shelby-Rising City, but what can I do that's more to help teachers reflect, whether it is teacher to teacher, teacher to me, or teacher self-reflection. And so that is going to be my learn and my focus until I can figure some great things out. Yeah. So that was my big learn. So thanks, Mark, for leading that portion. And
Absolutely.
Brooke, I know you're on here too. Amazing job.
We were so glad you were able to be there. And I just think, that conversation, like the word intentional was used several times. And it kind of just reminds me of what you just mentioned, Heather, about intentional ways to build relationships, whether it's over Zoom or in person. And Yeah, in schools, there's just so much that we're doing. There's so much that we're thinking through, that like thinking through things intentionally, how can we help students and teachers to reflect on their learning, reflect on their practices? It just takes intentional steps with it. I think it was a really good conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember where I heard it. And if anybody knows, tell me. But it says, they said if you're not reflecting, then you're a first year teacher every year. Because in the reflection, that's where you make the changes to your lesson. And so the same thing rings true for me as an administrator. If I'm not reflecting on things that I did and making changes and improvements, then I'm a first year principal every year. So, gosh, we just have to be intentional about providing those opportunities for that reflection and for that growing.
Yeah, and I almost want to tie these two conversations, or like we've had a number here, but two of the conversations together here, and say that part of that wellness, self-care, keeping your finger on the pulse of how much work is driving you versus you driving it, maybe. When we load up our plate with too much for us to handle, or for us to just barely get by with handling it, we then don't give ourselves the opportunity to take the time necessary to have the depth of reflection that would be most beneficial to the greatest satisfaction for the revisions and the new iterations of things moving forward. I think that's factored into some of the frustrations of this year too, is the busyness has sort of limited our ability to truly be intentional about the things that make this job something we just absolutely love, and we'll put in the extra hours for, and striking that balance is important.
Yeah. So Cody Bobles, who's the high school principal here at Shelby-Rising City, him and I were both at this ESU day yesterday, and we talked about, are we stretching our teachers a mile wide and an inch deep, or do we want to stretch them a mile deep and an inch wide? So do we want to make their sandboxes smaller so they can reflect and they can improve? And if so, how can we do that? So how can we be intentional about that? Yeah. So great discussions.
What I love at ESU 7 and ESUs across the state provide spaces in those principal clusters, for example, for reflection to happen amongst administrators, which is every bit as important as well. So
absolutely,
just great stuff. So Mark, you got to learn from this week.
Absolutely. I mentioned that my love and my learn were tied together. So I'm going to go back to this English learner conversation that I had in the district. And I came across just an infographic by just a really great author named Valentina Gonzalez. She writes on a lot of topics supporting English learners in the classroom. And this graphic that I saw on Twitter, actually, she has talked about the different types of English learners that come into school. So we use this phrase English learners, but when you really dig into it, you might have English learners that are born in your community and have lived their entire lives in your community, but they're English learners. And maybe you have some English learners in your district who are newcomers, that they've been in the country for less than 2 years. Or maybe you've had some English learners who are refugees and they didn't necessarily choose to come here, but they were forced to make that decision. Maybe you have some students that are English learners that haven't been in school for several years. And so we have a language need there, but we also have some significant content needs. Maybe you've had students who have been served in an English learner program for long periods of time, maybe 6+ years. And then maybe you have some English learners who are also receiving SPED support. And so, we use this phrase English learners, but there's all these different situations, and students come from different backgrounds, and they have different needs. And so that was just an eye-opening conversation too, thinking about what's the situation a student is coming from, and how might that shape some of the services and support that student needs. So we come and we think, okay, there's definitely a language need there. We need to help the student acquire the language, or maybe there's a content need, but there's also all these other situations that bring these different needs into play. And how can schools support in those areas as well? So it was just a really good, eye-opening conversation for me. And again, an encouraging conversation as I hear from teachers about how they're addressing some of these things. So it was a really beneficial conversation.
Well, and in that, you're obviously hearing things like instructional practices, and you're probably going to gravitate to the technology potentially that would come around and support some of those needs. But I also think that it's so important to recognize within that work is the value that student, that having that depth of conversation about trying to meet their needs brings towards the student feeling recognized and that relationships piece, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
thank you. I'm as a learner, you would have to think, gosh, thanks for recognizing that this is really hard for me for a reason that I shouldn't have to apologize for. and at the same time, maybe who knows what the person's history is, but it's just can be a little challenging to foster those relationships. And so great to see that we're having conversations about how to step in and foster those towards meaningful educational experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay, then maybe that feeds in a little bit to my learn from this week. And I'm going to say that probably Brooke and Jen will make fun of me for bringing up Stephanie on here. But my girlfriend, Stephanie, actually works in education in Iowa as a special education administrator. And I learned something this week that was, I don't know, I've thought a lot about it, which is why I'm bringing this up. I'm going to give her a shout out for prefacing this for me or framing it for me. I was talking with her, with Stephanie, about the difference between personalized learning and differentiated instruction and individualized learning, and that those are we could Venn diagram those things and they would certainly have their overlap, but they are distinctly different. And I think sometimes we just have a tendency to fire off that this is personalized just because it sort of has elements of those others, when it's not. And it's not the hierarchy value one of those over another either. But in the midst of my sort of chatting about this, she posted me the three terms that she feels like that the gen ed teachers sometimes can interchangeably use but shouldn't. And she said that accommodations, modifications, and interventions are all drastically different things. And to use those interchangeably is something that she would, recommend we all sort of pause to get our mind around. And so my takeaway from this, I could still be wrong, but this is what I took away from it, was to think of accommodations as kind of being conditional, like the conditions a little bit, that modifications would be a little bit closer to that differentiation piece where we're actually tinkering with the materials and the content and the assessments and those kind of things, where an intervention might be talking more about strategies. And so if you're going to be intentional, kind of need to have language and a focused purpose on what you're actually trying to accomplish at this particular step. And I was like, I would have probably used most of those interchangeably. And so I feel like I learned a lot just from that informal conversation in an avenue that was really thought-provoking.
It's so good for me to hear that you're having those conversations and that other people are having that struggle too, because we literally just went through with our MTSS team, and we were talking about the differences between accommodations, modifications, and interventions. And so we were trying to put definitions to them to help our teachers understand then the difference between, and that there is a difference between. And so yeah, it feels good to me to not be in the boat alone.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, I think we've had some of those conversations too, and it's just, even for educators who have been in schools for a long time, there's just such great benefit, in sitting down and saying, when we use this word, this is exactly what we mean.
Yes.
And when we use this word, this is what we mean.
Yes.
And just being on the same page, even in a district, so that people aren't having to make assumptions that we know for sure. I just think that's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
It was a lot of fun, and I did appreciate the opportunity to learn in that. And so, which leads us to our final conversation for today, which is going to be on leadership. And we'll go ahead and start with Heather here. And this could be anything, just as a reiteration, from philosophy to systems to something you think about as you're walking around the halls of your school. And it's not to prioritize anything. It's just to sort of give you a little space to talk about something that maybe is on your mind in the avenue of school leadership.
Awesome. Okay, so I actually have two things. So sorry, breaking the rules, I guess, a bit. So I guess my first leadership tidbit would be get involved and make those relationships and keep those relationships. So, in my teacher time was all spent at Norfolk Public Schools. Shout out to the Panthers. And I have fantastic relationships with, so Angie Bauman, she was my principal when I was a teacher, and she has guided me so much and continued to guide me. So I know that I can, if something happens, I can call her, or Angie Hausman. So they're my Angies. I can still call them. And so keep those relationships from past districts or past positions, and then always look to continue to grow and make relationships. So, that book study is another opportunity for me to meet female administrators from across the state. And so any chance I have, I'm looking to network and meet people and figure out, what's working for you, and can I tweak that and make it work here? Or so that would be my first thing. And I think we hit on that with relationships with students. So we want to make sure that we have relationships with peers as well. And my second thing, I think, would be, I'm kind of big on this, making sure, we talk about making sure we help those students who are struggling. But I really think we need to be meeting all students at their level. So if a student is high, we need to meet them high and help them get higher. If a student is right on track, you know what I mean? And so really getting that differentiation. So we've started this win time here, and I know win time is a huge term that's used very differently in different places. But we use our MAP scores, and students are broken up based on their RIT score, and it is amazing to watch these hallways the last 20 minutes of the day, because kids are like running to get to their win group because they have so much fun and they're being served at their level. And I get to jump back in and have some really cool groups. So, I've got a group sitting in crisscross in my office helping them, and it's just super fun. And it's like an all hands on deck. And so I think anytime you have the opportunity to serve someone at their level, is just huge, and something we should continue to do as leaders.
And I would say it gets right back to that relationship piece. You see me,
Yes.
you recognize my struggles, and are trying
Yes.
to do your best to step into those spaces that help me to have a productive struggle.
Yes. Yes.
Just so great. Gosh, thanks for sharing those. Those are
Absolutely.
Really amazing tidbits for us. Mark, what would you say from your role in the ESUs?
Yeah, well, as Heather mentioned, yesterday we had our principals in, and I really enjoy our group of principals here in ESU 7. And she also mentioned kind of a theme of the day was supporting teacher growth.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked quite a bit about evaluation and growth in that process. And there were several principals that just talked about the use of good mediative questions in meeting with teachers. And I just love that too, because I think that, we're meeting with a teacher, this, and one of the contexts we talked about was in like a post-evaluation conference, and just the power of questions in that setting, because it really is a great way of honoring even teacher experience and skill. Like just saying, when you think about engaging students, what might be some ways that you are doing that in your classroom, or have done that, or what might be a good fit for this particular situation, because it causes a teacher to think back on, here are some things that I've done that I know are effective, that would apply well to this situation. And those are all the teacher's ideas, and the principal then comes along and support and just brainstorming and helping the teacher process that, and then supporting an implementation in ways that the teacher needs. But I just think that approach can be so powerful. And it was just like a huge theme of the day, like our principals wanting to for themselves to grow in the area of just being a questioner, and really thinking through thoughtful questions that they can share with their teacher to help them grow in their instruction.
And I would say Mark and Brooke both are like master gurus of mediative questions. So they've done the cognitive coaching. And so Mark comes to Shelby and is able to coach all of our teachers. And I spend amazing time with Brooke being coached myself. And so just that guiding of thinking, oh, what an amazing opportunity. Yeah. So thanks for that, Mark.
Well, I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, it is just a great process. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, I would agree. Brooks guided me through some conversations as well, and just kind of learning through that collaboration is terrific. And I will share too, before the day is out across all of our socials, we will have our next social PD story, which Brooks put the content together for. So if you want to learn more about building self-efficacy in our students, you can catch a little 1-minute tidbit on that from Brooke. That was really some good stuff.
Awesome.
So we'll plug that here real quick as we kind of bring things to a close. I try to honor everybody's time, so we're a little bit over half an hour, but I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Heather, for joining us. Thank you, Mark, as well.
Absolutely.
And for all of your leadership and advocacy for education. It's really important, and it's great that we get a chance to connect and kind of get these stories out, right? Because there's a lot of great work going on and a lot of really passionate people, and it's so motivating to just hear that on a Friday. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank
you.